Tonight, Turkey launches airstrikes over northern Syria and threatens to launch a ground invasion. Meanwhile, however, President Erdogan offers an olive branch to Bashar Al-Assad. And that's not all. Erdogan also has a cordial meeting with Egyptian President Sisi after virtually no diplomatic relations with the nation. Our guest tonight is foreign policy expert and Medyascope contributor Aydın Selcen, who will make sense of it all. In addition, there is an earthquake in western Turkey. I am Murat, Türsan, and this is This Week in Turkey. Our first story tonight, Turkey has launched airstrikes against elements in northern Syria in response to the terrorist bombing in Istanbul last week that claimed the lives of 6 people. The government pinned the blame solely on PKK and YPG, groups that Turkey considers terrorist organizations. Turkey has been waging a bloody war against the PKK on its own soil and in northern Syria and northern Iraq since 1984, as PKK seeks to establish an independent state in parts of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Turkey has also been clashing with YPG units since their inception in 2011, as it considers PKK and YPG one and the same, a sentiment not shared by the United States. While the U.S. does list PKK as a terrorist organization, it considers YPG a separate entity and a valuable ally in the fight against ISIS in the region. On the map here, the yellow areas are YPG controlled, whereas blue and green are Turkey or Turkey-backed forces captured in 2019. The black spots are ISIS-controlled zones. This week, Turkey struck about 90 targets in the northern part of Syria, reportedly using airspace controlled by U.S. and Russia, both parties vehemently against Turkey's military involvement in Syria as they see it as a destabilizing factor. However, President Erdogan doesn't seem content with just sticking to airstrikes, as he stated that another ground invasion might not be too far behind. Let's go to the details.
On Sunday, Turkey launched airstrikes over the northern regions of Syria and Iraq. The Defense Ministry says that it targeted PKK, YPG positions, groups that Ankara holds responsible for last week's terror attack in Istanbul.
Suriye'de kontrolleri altında tuttukları bölgelerden.
On Wednesday, during his party's group meeting, President Erdogan stated that Turkey could also launch a ground invasion of northern Syria, targeting northern towns such as Tal Rafat, Manbij, and Kobane, northern cities that Turkey wants to turn into a buffer zone between itself and YPG forces. According to reports from Al Arabiya, Turkish fighters conducted strikes in airspace controlled by Russia and the United States, indicating a go-ahead for Ankara to carry out its operations. However, the Pentagon replied with a swift condemnation of the strikes, saying, Turkish air attacks in northern Syria threaten the safety of the United States military personnel, and the escalating situation is jeopardizing years of progress against ISIS. Turkey also earned itself a response from Moscow. Ambassador Alexander Lavrentiev said, Turkey must refrain from using excessive military force in Syria and must find a peaceful solution to the Kurdish problem. However, as bombs rain down in northern Syria, Erdogan also hints at a potential meeting with the Syrian president, Bashar Al-Assad. The two strongmen had found themselves at odds for nearly a decade, as Turkey had backed anti-government forces in Syria in an attempt to topple the Assad regime. Again in his group meeting, Erdogan said, "Could there be a meeting with Assad? There could be. There are no hard feelings in politics." According to reports from the Associated Press, Erdogan proposed a meeting with Assad in Damascus but was shot down. But as a counteroffer, the Assad government proposed a meeting in a third country.
And this has been an interesting week for Turkey and Egypt, because after years of virtually no diplomatic relations, President Erdogan has had a cordial meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And the reason why that's a big deal has a rich and storied reason that goes back more than a decade. You see Erdogan waving to the crowd here, but he waves a little odd with his thumb tucked in. He does that a lot, but that's not a regular wave. That's a Rabia symbol. It symbolizes the number 4. That signal commemorates the August 2013 Rabaa massacre in Egypt, where the military forces led by then General Al-Sisi massacred 1,000 people in Rabaa Square in Cairo. The Rabia sign is used by the Muslim Brotherhood and its supporters, and it is an anti-Sisi symbol. And that is no coincidence because Erdogan and his party AKP have been open supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood, a Sunni Islamist religious and political group that took control of Egypt, its parliament, and the presidency following the 2011 Egyptian revolution. However, Muslim Brotherhood was ousted in 2013 by Al-Sisi in a military coup, and the two nations haven't seen eye to eye ever since. But it wasn't just Egypt that has taken an offense to Turkey's open support of Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and many other nations see the Muslim Brotherhood as a threat. Thus, relations between Turkey and other countries in the Middle East have been either non-existent or directly hostile. But Turkey has been trying to repair relations in the Middle East since late last year. Relations with Saudi Arabia and UAE have already seen some improvement, and relations with Israel have been revitalized dramatically. Here's the thing, though. This video of Erdogan waving to the crowd was taken only days after his cordial meeting with Al-Sisi, which is rather odd. Aydın Selcen will be on with us in just a little bit to make sense of Turkey's potential ground invasion and Erdogan's relationship with Egypt. But let's get the details first.
President Erdogan, in a subtle yet historically significant move, shook hands with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi at the opening reception of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. According to reports in the Egyptian media, following the cordial interaction between the two presidents, they later retired to meet in private. Diplomatic relations between Turkey and Egypt have been maintained by proxy since 2013. Turkey was one of the countries that firmly criticized the 2013 coup that overthrew Mohamed Morsi. Morsi was replaced by the current Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Ever since the change in leadership, Turkey and Egypt had only minimal state-level contact. President Erdogan had in the past called Sisi a murderer, a putschist, and a tyrant. Turkey's harsh criticism of the coup in Egypt and Sisi was also received poorly by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the biggest supporters of Egypt's new administration, leading to a deterioration of Ankara's relations with the two.
Joining me now, Medyascope contributor Aydın Selcen. Mr. Selcen, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure as always, sir. Now, I'd like to start off with Turkey's potential ground operation into Syria. Following the airstrikes this week, President Erdogan said that a ground mission could follow to eliminate PKK and YPG targets that Ankara holds responsible for the Istanbul bombing. However, United States and Russia appear less enthused about the potential boots-on-the-ground invasion. Do you think that Turkey can and will launch a ground invasion like it did back in 2019?
Yes, in fact, I do. I think a limited scoped ground operation in Northern Syria, the probability of such an operation is higher than ever today.
I see. And how do you think Russia and the United States will greet this potential operation?
Well, I mean, we can start by enumerating a long list of circumstances which would allow this time Erdogan to start a ground operation into Syria. And furthermore, we will have elections in perhaps 6 to 7 months' time in Turkey. So that's another added element in that analysis. I believe that the Russia's invasion of attempted invasion of Ukraine heightened once again the so-called geostrategic or geopolitical value of Turkey as a NATO ally. So in that respect, and also in a way, the so-called global actors are busy elsewhere, whereas the regional actors, such as Iran, are also busy internally. On the other hand, Erdogan managed to yet conclude another U-turn by shaking hands with Sisi, and beforehand, Erdogan also managed to also change course in his policy concerning all US regional allies such as Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. In Ukraine, also Turkey plays an intermediary role, the latest example of which is the gathering together of CIA Director William Burns and SVR, his Russian counterpart, SVR chief Sergei Narishkin in Ankara, in order to alleviate the risk of a nuclear war in or around Ukraine. So for all those matters, actually, we can add more elements to this analysis. But I believe the circumstances from Erdogan's perspective are ripe in order to start a ground operation into Syria. Furthermore, I believe for the US, NATO, of course, is a NATO ally, 70-year-old NATO ally, whereas the Syrian Democratic Forces, the backbone of which is constituted by YPG, YPJ, which are in turn are the, let's say, the Syrian branches of the PKK, which is considered as a terrorist organization by the US. The US's cooperation with SDF was only temporary. It was just a cooperation limited in scope, and it was actually Turkey's fault in the beginning not to get more vigorously into the fight against ISIL. That's the reason why US opted for the SDF. And now it appears to me that Erdogan offers a choice to US. Look, I can take it over from the SDF in the east of Euphrates, and it wouldn't make you any difference because I'm the one, I will be the one, and I'm already the one who is fighting against ISIL inside Turkey and in Syria. Furthermore, Hayat Tahrir Sham is a terrorist organization, is a jihadist organization, but it's a Syrian organization. And it does not constitute such a global threat as ISIL. So I'm the one who can tame, in a way, HTS. And then I can also negotiate with Assad by controlling these territories. And by no means meaning Erdogan's, taking over the east of Euphrates will not translate into giving it up to the Russians, to Iranians, or to Syrians. So for all those matters, I believe neither Russia nor the US, and even perhaps we can add the EU as well, their reactions are very weak, subdued to this possibility or probability of a ground offensive in Syria. For those reasons, I believe that the chances are higher than ever.
I see.
For such a ground offensive or operation into Syria.
I see. And you did mention Assad. While we're on the subject, I'd like to ask you now, President Erdogan is continuing his tour of making amends with the countries in the region. And he has said that there are no hard feelings in politics. We could potentially consider a meeting with Assad. Now, what do you make of this? What is Erdogan standing to gain with a potential allegiance with Assad or making a peace deal with Assad? Your thoughts?
It appears as a real contradiction that when I cite within the same sentence that both the probability of a ground operation into Syria is higher than ever, yet at the same time, the chances of Erdogan's direct contact with Assad again is higher than ever simultaneously. It appears as a contradiction, but it does not seem so actually if we look a little bit closer, because for Assad also it doesn't make such a difference And also perhaps it plays into his hands in a way, because he appears as the one, Assad, that he's a strong dictator trying to take over the entire sovereignty over all Syrian territory, yet he doesn't have the capacity to do so. So the presence of the Turkish armed forces in north of Syria will represent an excuse. And also Russians are pushing both sides, both Assad and Erdogan, to get into such talks, just to drive yet another wedge in the NATO alliance or in the Western alliance. And for Erdogan also, even before the elections, to take this card from the hands of CHP and to turn around to tell the opposition that, look, I also speak now with Assad, and I can perhaps reopen our embassy in Damascus, which will mean that I am a leader, in foreign policy. I am a strong leader, and you see that I can manage all these files at the same time. So I believe that a meeting, I cannot predict, of course, whether Erdogan and Assad will meet face to face, but direct contact of some sort is possible, and even more so highly probable in the coming weeks or months, perhaps, or before the elections, or maybe right after that possible ground operation. On the other hand, whenever it will be time to negotiate with Assad directly, it will give yet another opportunity for Erdogan to have a strong bargaining position, because he will have different gifts to offer Assad, and he may as well start by, for example, leaving Idlib to Assad and keeping the rest, meaning all that territory or all that region, starting from Afrin in the west and ending up at the Iraqi border in the east. And as we know, also Turkish military presence since early 90s is in northern Iraq to stay.
I see. And sir, I'd like to end on President Erdogan's meeting with Egyptian President Al-Sisi. He had what looked like a war meeting with Sisi this week after a decade of hostilities. But he's back in Turkey this week flashing the Rabia sign. So this is utterly confusing. What do you think about this? Is there a chance of normalizing relations with Egypt right now or no?
I believe so, yes. As with Israel, as with United Arab Emirates, and as with Saudi Arabia, to normalize relations with Egypt is, follows Turkey's national security and economy needs. So I think Erdogan will be able to follow that up, and that Rabia sign and all the rest is for public consumptions, as Egyptians and all the others know that. I do not think it was such a well-planned meeting, because you would remember that Egypt just perhaps weeks ago, even a week ago perhaps, turned around from a direct dialogue with Turkey through the voice of his foreign minister, Sameh Shukri. Egypt declared that because of Turkey's position in Libya, because of the recently signed deal with the temporary Libyan government, Egypt will suspend this dialogue with Turkey. Whereas just a few weeks later, through the intermediary of the Emir of Qatar, Tamim Al-Sani, when Erdogan went to watch the opening game of the World Cup in Qatar, such a, let's say, chance encounter with Sisi was made possible, and the two shook hands warmly, as you rightly pointed out. And then it's the beginning of a thaw. In Libya, if Egypt and Turkey can arrive to a convergent joint position, it will also liberate their hands, both their hands, to deal with other Western powers such as Italy and France. And for Turkey also, to yet again to start to talk with Israel and Egypt will bring back the normal situation in East Mediterranean, in which Greece will no longer be aligned or allied with Israel and Egypt, but Turkey, Egypt, and Israel will be able to call the shots in the future, perhaps.
I see. Mr. Selcen, thank you for breaking that down. Always a pleasure to have you on, and thank you for being able to join us tonight.
Thank you very much.
And in domestic news, Turkey shook on Tuesday when a 5.9 magnitude earthquake hit Düzce, some 200 kilometers east of Istanbul. While luckily no loss of life is reported as of now, there are 50 injured, and it has caused untold damage to buildings and other infrastructure. Now, Turkey is no stranger to earthquakes. They are unfortunately common here. The worst on record in recent history was the 1999 Izmit earthquake that killed over an estimated 17,000 people. Though this quake was comparatively mild to the 99 catastrophe, it still leaves thousands homeless, as massive cracks on buildings have left them unsafe and uninhabitable. And has left residents of Düzce crying an age-old Turkish motto: where is the government? Let's go to the video.
A 5.9 magnitude earthquake shook western Turkey on Tuesday, hitting the Düzce province about 200 kilometers east of Istanbul. The tremors were strong enough to be felt in both Istanbul and the capital Ankara, some 230 kilometers away. Though no fatalities are reported, about 50 people were injured and millions of dollars in damage has been reported. Residents of Düzce spent the night outside, fearing aftershocks, and many complained that the government was not doing enough to take precautionary measures.
Bize hiç kimse ulaşmıyor. Bizim hiç derdimize ilgileniyor. Yağmur yağacak. Kimse bizimle ilgilenmiyor. Gelen giden şatafat için geliyor. Belediye binasının önüne. Kardeşim bu böyle değil. Devletin zor gününde milletin yanında olması gereken olan şey, biliyorsunuz binanın halini. Bu millet nasıl oturacak içeride? Yani nasıl oturacak bu bina, nasıl, ne kadar güvenli, ne kadar bir şey yani.
Yani bizim yaşadığımız yere görüyorsunuz, çok mağduruk, çok da zor durumdayız şu anda. Ne burada ailemiz var, ne babamız var, burada hiç Allah'tan başka bir dertimiz var, kimse burada yok yanımızda.
Bizim birbirimizden komşu olarak kimse bize sahip çıkmıyor. Açık mıyız, açıkta mıyız, engelleyiz. Bu binanın oturulacak bir durumu var mı? Bak, oturulacak. Şimdi, gel abi, şu binanın haline bak. Gel buraya. Allah rızası için. Abi, bu devlet yok, bir şey yok diyor. Kardeşim, yetkililer yok bir şey diyor. Gel buraya. Yetkililer yok bir şey diyor.
Böyle yaşıyor.
Kardeşim, sen arkadaş buraya bak. Gel. Gel abi, evde bir şey yok diyenlere bak. Burada bir şey yok diyenlere bak. Daire de aynı bak, haberin olsun. Bütün evler böyle bak.
Bacımın benim
Bak, dur abla çık orada, abla çık. Bir şey yok diyene bak. Bir şey yok diyor bu evde.
Ben şimdi bu evde nasıl yaşayacağım? Çoluk çocuğumu nasıl eve koyacağım?
And with that, that's it for us on This Week in Turkey. I have Murat, Türsan. A special thanks to Mehmet Tanverdi for helping me out with news text, and Kathleen Phelps for voiceovers, of course. And if you feel like it, maybe give them a little thumbs up, a little pat on the back, and that is always appreciated. But more importantly, thank you for joining us.